Hello everyone, That One Gamer here. So today I'm going to be revising a vocoding tutorial that I made a long while ago. However, you might be asking, okay, why are you doing this? Well, the main reason would be is the fact is that honestly I shouldn't refer to some things in there as how they were not supposed to be referred to. For example, sometimes I'd refer to an audio and say something like, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," or "You should do this because it looks good," or or because it doesn't look good. You do not refer to audio as a visual. This is not video editing. This is just merely editing an audio to do something. Anyhow, so let's get to the main point. FL Studio is a music production software. You can download the trial for free on their website, which I will link in the description below. There are two versions of FL Studio that do exist. You have FL Studio Mobile and FL Studio. FL Studio is the one we're going to be focusing on and not the mobile version. FL Studio is the desktop version to say. It's supported by both macOS and Windows. So you can get that by clicking this button right here. I will be linking this in the description specifically. Note here, whenever we go to the page, it'll say to download a free trial. FL Studio is not actually free. It is not free. FL Studio does require payment, however, the trial is unlimited. But the thing is that it will drop out your audio after a certain time. Only for a short time, actually, while you're in FL Studio. So, for example, if you're using a plugin for like maybe 20 seconds, or not even 20, like maybe a minute or 5 minutes, it'll just drop out randomly. But the full version requires payment, which is probably only recommended to pay for unless you're planning on doing stuff like music production. You can find the downloads for both Windows and Mac OS over here, respected by their orange buttons, which are right below the operating system name. Now I'll go ahead into making a tutorial as to how to vocode. I will not show how to install FL Studio because most of it should be relatively fine to install. It should go ahead and basically get everything installed for you. I already own FL Studio, however, it should be really easy and it should explain it right to you then and there. So essentially, now we're going to move on to how to actually vocode and get everything set up. You've installed FL Studio. Congratulations. Chances are you've booted up with a music file as your project file first. So the way to fix that, or change it, is to go to File, here at the top, then go to New, or New from Template if you want to, then go to Minimal and Basic with Limiter. You should now see this. This is how you start out in FL Studio. However, chances are these right here, the little volume sliders, will be different because they start differently. I just like them extra large. So you should start off with something like that. You should not hear that when you start, but you can use your keyboard that you have, like the type, with FL Studio, and you do not need an actual piano. So ZXC will be like that. So what we'll do now is we'll actually get into vocoding. But first, let me explain a few basic things. Panning and volume. Panning will be on the left part of a thing. So for example, for this kick, right here, if I make it left, that'll go to the left of your headphones only. If I make it go right, it'll only go to the right. However, volume, which is self-explanatory, if it's to the far right, it's going to be loud. If it's to the far left, it's going to be really, really, really quiet or won't even play. So now that we have that knowledge, let's get on to actually making something. So what we want to do is load up the default vocoder template. We're going to go to File, New from Template, Utility, Vocoder. And then do not save changes to this project file. You do not need it. Now this thing right here called Fruity Notebook, you will not need it unless you plan to take notes during this. However, I would recommend probably taking notes in a notepad if you plan to take notes. Not notebook. Anyhow, so this is the vocoder template. This is everything you get started out with whenever you load the preset up. This is what you get whenever you first play it.
Melting to the imprisoned image of a damaged mind, ravaged by an unforgiving time, expressed divine.
So let's explain some two things here. The actual original audio file, well, we can't even listen to it because it's on that, which is this.
Melting.
Okay, yeah, okay, fine.
Melting to the imprisoned image of a damaged mind, ravaged by.
That's how that sounds. And if it's actually vocoded,
Melting to the imprisoned image.
yeah, that's how that sounds. So that would be our modulator. Our modulator is going to be the voice itself or the file we are going to be using with the carrier. The carrier is bright in this situation. A carrier will modify, basically is what is going to modify our modulator. However, we, in this case, are not going to be using the default FLS file. We are going to be using the "you're fired" audio.
You're fired!
So in some situations, you'll have to change the tempo. However, in this situation, I think the audio sounds perfectly fine. However, you can change it by like 5 or whatever through here. Yeah, but I'm just going to keep it at 140. We are not going to be using bright for this. We are not going to be using bright for our chord progressions. We are going to be using something different. So, but first, we're going to get the measures on this set up to 10. Now, delete that. Anything in there. You can also do Control A and then press the delete button. And hold Control whenever you press A, by the way. Then what you want to do is you want to go to Plugin Database, Generators, let's see, Synth Classic, and then you want to go to Citrus. Now that you have Citrus, you can also hide vocodex, by the way. Vocodex is what actually gets the vocoding done. However, of course, we're not really going to be focusing on that in this situation. It gets it done, it's just that it's already really done. So what we're going to do here is you see Citrus exists. Now let's also point this out. Anything on 3 will be a carrier. Anything on 2 will be a modulator, aka your voice file that you have. So we're going to go and use our mouse and just scroll up and just go to 3. That's now our carrier. So we can do something like this.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit!
However, that does not sound that good. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing this to be using PWM. You can access this menu by right-clicking and then going to the one you want. And it'd be probably a lot easier if you did it that way anyhow. So what you want to do now is, now that you've made your chord progression, a chord progression from what I've understood in terms of my knowledge of music, is that it's just 3 notes that are like, they can evoke a certain emotion in a way. Like some can sound dreary, some can sound really unnerving. Like it can be used in horror pieces as well. So what we're going to do is take a look at how it sounds at PWM now.
You're fired! You can't fire me,
Now it sounds at least a little bit better. I'm going to extend that.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit!
Now also, you can hold shift while at the end of this if you want to rearrange all the notes and you don't want to have to, you know, move each individual note. It'll be really useful. So now we're going to add another chord progression. It won't be the exact same length, but it'll be probably about similar.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't quit, I quit!
Except I'm going to go ahead and make this look a little bit different.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't...
That's another thing I will specify about this process as well. Vocoding will take a lot of time, and it definitely indeed does take a lot of patience from you, the person who's vocoding the audio. If you're just straight up making the audio and you're like, oh my god, I don't want to have to hear this. Sadly, I have bad news. There is no way to actually skip forward in the audio, and you have to repeat it consistently until you have the sound you desire, from beginning to end. This is why it's probably best to have audio files that are around 1 to 2 minutes. So I'm going to mess with these chords a bit more.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit.
And so now we're going to add another one.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit.
I'm gonna make this go like half of that. I'm gonna make this go up a
You're
bit.
fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit.
I'm gonna make that sound
You're
different.
fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit.
No, it sounds too sudden. The voice just changes too suddenly.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You.
Wait, what?
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog.
Let me change that up. I'm gonna change it right here. That'd probably be a better idea.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife.
Okay, now what we want to do is we're gonna do that, and then of course mess with these
You're
chords a bit
fired.
more.
You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife.
And then do that.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job.
Let's see.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.
And then we still mess around with it more to make it sound the way we desire. So if we want it to sound higher in pitch, yes. Also, never make the mistake of mixing up your carriers and your modulators. If you mix up your modulators with your carriers, you get something like this.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I'm fired. You can't fire me. I'm fired. You can't fire me. I'm fired. You can't fire me.
It sounds awful. Never mix up your modulators with your carriers. Remember, the modulator is your voice. So each time you play a chord progression on that, it's going to be awful.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.
And now in the way to fix that little cutoff at the end, we just maybe bring it up about maybe 0.75 of a measure. -2, maybe about halfway. About half, like 10.5 probably. Like, just a little bit more.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.
I'm going to change that scream here.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.
Yeah, that's something easily able to be done. Just change up the scream and make it sound at least a little bit more energetic. Now, if you want to make it to where the pitch is higher, easy. Just hold Shift and then use the arrow keys on your keyboard to make it go up or down.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, honey, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.
And that's basically how to get that done. So what we're going to do next is apply some effects to it. Such as, well, first off, actually, I'm going a bit too far. We haven't even gotten to make the sound at least a little bit better. We're going to just go to Citrus, add another one of it, hold Control, then press A, then Control C on the chords that you've just made, then paste it into there, Control V, and then do Then, of course, make your citrus channel into 3. Now, this is self-explanatory. Just just right-click, add another effect that you want, and then
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah!
And as you can see, it sounds a little bit different, but if we just mess with it a little bit more, it'll sound better.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah!
That's a way to do it. And plus, we want to lower the volumes of some of our carriers and points if they're too loud and they just seem to be. And now that we've got all of our chord progressions set up and we have all the carriers set up, the carriers are a really easier part. It's really just copying and pasting, then adding another version of Citrus, and just setting your channel. That's really about as easy as it is. The channel is this thing right here. You should always set it to 3 since that's your carrier channel. The modulator channel is 2, which should only be used for the one voice file that you have. Now we're going to add some effects such as soundgoodizer and maximus to it. So what we want to do is we're going to move out generators, go to effects, dynamics, and soundgoodizer. Apply this to voco out, aka your third channel right here. Never apply it to master, and I've only just recently figured this out. Master will apply it both to the original vocal file, and it'll apply it to the voco out. So it'll apply it to both the carrier and the audio. So now,
you're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah!
That's another way to do it.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah!
And that's soundgoodizer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to load up Maximus and do it on voco out as well. Now think of this as, I don't know, sort of like a limiter, really.
You're fired. You can't fire.
These are your high notes, mid notes, and low notes. So for example, I don't know, bass, mid, I don't even know. Alright, so we're gonna go to our lows first. Actually, no, let's go to our master first, and then just...
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah! You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah!
And that's really how you can somewhat change an audio to be different. Now, if you really wanted to, you could go to the, I think it's over in filter. Yeah, Fruity Parametric EQ. You can apply some equalizer on that as well.
You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah! You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah! You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a frog. You can't frog me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. 40 hours work. Pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. Ah!
As you can tell, I'm not exactly that good with 3D parametric EQ. I still have a lot to learn on it, but you can definitely learn with it.
You're fired.
So that's the basic part of actually how to vocode. What you do to export it is you go to File, Export, and then MP3. And then you save it to the place you desire. Now we're going to be moving on how to actually edit this with Vegas Pro, which will be paid software. However, I do not think there's a free version out there. So if you're going to edit a video, I'll explain further in the next part if you do not have Vegas. So now that you've finished working on your vocoded file, what you can do is you can go into this folder right here, whichever folder you stored your files in specifically, and you can get the clip that you need. So we're going to get the "You're Fired" clip, and we're going to pin it. Well, not pin it, but we're going to put it in Vegas Pro, which
You're fired!
it's obvious that it's the original clip from ASDFMovie 12. So we're going to go ahead and load up the file we exported.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't quit, I quit! You can't quit, you're a fraud! You can't fraud me, you're my wife!
And you might notice now there is some delay. Alright, so that's usually expected to happen with vocoding if you don't tend to get it exactly rightly put on, if you don't have the tempo set right. However, this is a really easy fix with Vegas Pro. What you can just do is hold Control, and then continue listening until, luckily, this time, unlike FL Studio, you can just go to a specific audio point just to actually hear it.
Fired! Fired!
And that should work.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't quit, I quit! You can't quit, you're a fraud! You can't fraud me, you're my wife! I'm not your wife, you're my wife! Boy, my housework! Pretty good, but I quit my job! You can't quit your job, you're fired!
And that's how you do that. Which is easy, really easy to do this. You just hold Shift, no, not Shift, hold Control, left Control, and then you just move your mouse left and right to shorten the video to make it play faster. That way you can make it to where you're not having to worry about getting it exactly precisely right, and it'll be a little bit sped up, but it's the audio will probably mess that. So what we're going to do is now lower the volume of that.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't quit, I quit! You can't quit, you're a fraud! You can't fraud me, you're my wife!
Okay, so we know that the audio already works. So now we're going to go ahead, before I actually do that, we're going to press this little button right here, which is the FX button. We're going to press that, and then we're going to go to gradient map, wherever I can find it. Right here. I'm going to go to this, and now we're going to delete this center one. Right this part we're going to make black, so it makes the background black. And then this first one we're going to make it whatever color we want. So if we wanted it orange, we can make it orange. If we wanted it blue, we can make it blue. We can make it purple if we want. Whatever you want. So we're going to make it, in this case, a light teal.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't quit, I quit! You can't quit, you're a fraud! You can't fraud me, you're my wife! I'm not your wife, you're my wife!
Now to change it, in terms of, instead of just, this simple color, what you can do is go to, and remember, this is only if you have Vegas Pro. If you do have Vegas Pro, yes, you can do all this definitely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in glow.
You're fired! You can't fire me, I quit! You can't quit, I quit! You can't quit, you're a...
And be sure to adjust your values a little bit even while the video is playing so you know how it looks. Or even on a simple little thing right here, like this. Then you just adjust it to the color you want. And then I want a little bit less glow intensity. I want it around them, but I don't want it fully covering them. I don't want it all over them. I want it at least there. I want it noticeable, but I don't want it yeah, that would be more like it.
Can't quit, you're a fraud! You can't fraud me, you're my wife! I'm not your wife, you're my wife!
That's another way to go across it. Then you just do that. Then add another effect. Then we're going to add an effect which is called, let's see, bump map. That'll make it look like this. It looks really weird when you first use it. What we're going to do is we're going to make the intensity a little bit. Ambiance, we don't want to worry about that, I guess. Bump height, you can change that if you don't want such a high bump. So you can do something like that. I usually always tend to think it's like coming off of paper with a bump map. I always think it's like it's on a flat surface, and it looks a little bit different then. And then if you wanted to set the location or whatever, you can do something like that to where this bump map is. So you can do something like that. Yeah. I'm going to set this at 000.
Can't quite, you're a fraud. You can't fraud me, you're my wife. I'm not your wife, you're my wife.
It's like such you're setting an outline basically. Then you do ambiance if you want. The shininess, I have no idea what that is. I think that might be for something else. Then we can just mess with the bump height, of course. If you do it with like larger bump heights, you'll probably notice that on the glow. So we can probably apply the glow after, which would probably be a smarter idea. Oh god, that's actually slightly terrifying.
You're fired. You can't fight me, I quit. You can't quit, I quit. You can't quit, you're a fraud. You can't fraud me, you're my wife. I'm not your wife, you're my wife. Boy, I mean, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job, you're fired. You're fired. You can't fight me, I quit. You can't quit, I quit. You can't quit, you're a fraud. You can't fraud me, you're my wife. I'm not your wife, you're my wife.
And that's a simple explanation. Then you can add some effect like, say, for example, starburst. Wait, hold on. Let me think about that again. Yeah, starburst. That'll be a good one. And then just choose a frame you want to use for reference. And then just add some strength on that. There you go. I usually like to only use 2 points because I personally think like 6 points, 4 points is ridiculous. You can just use stuff like 4 and it'll look much cooler. As for the aspect, I don't even see what that's doing right here. You could do something like that to where it looks like they're moving consistently.
You're fired. You can't fight me, I quit.
I'm gonna lower the render quality here so I'll see it properly and smoother.
You're fired.
No, okay, full.
I mean, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You're fired. You can't fight me, I quit. You can't quit, I quit. You can't quit, you're a fraud. You can't fraud me, you're my wife. I'm not your wife, you're my wife. Boy, I mean, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job, you're fired.
You could do something like that as well, to where it would at least, look like they're actually going out of the character. You can also rotate it to be back in the character and then soften the edges if you generally just want to do that. You can also add threshold to where it'll actually activate later on. So it's not so apparent or whatever, so it doesn't show so much. Then you can do the brilliance. It'll be best to work on like a different character for this one. Then center burst, I think would be cool to work on. Aspect, okay, whatever that is. Do something like that. Yep. And then brilliance, yeah, that you just don't want to worry too much about that. Threshold, though, is definitely one thing you do want to be concerned with because that'll determine on how much it actually shows. And then I usually like to apply the reduce flicker thing. And you can also do effect only if you generally want to see that. If you would want to, you can remove bump map in the case that you do not want that. But I personally tend to use it a lot. So I'm going to make my bump map move a bit. I'm going to need to move it around a little bit. Spotlights also work. If you generally wish to use spotlights, you can also use stuff like that, omnidirectional spotlights. Let me go to best.
You're fired. You can't fight me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a fraud. You can't fraud me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, I mean, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.
And that's really how you do the video editing for that. Then you just go, whenever you're done with this, you just go to File, Render As, and give it a stupid name or whatever you want to name it. Then just HD and InVec. Always this top option too. And then yeah, that's really about it for this newer vocoding tutorial. I hope there was some less confusion this time, and if there's any questions, please ask me in the comments below. I would be glad to actually answer them if there's any issues somebody might have regarding this they're making. Anyhow, thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time in one of my future videos. Bye.
You're fired. You can't fight me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a fraud. You can't fraud me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, I mean, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired. You're fired. You can't fight me. I quit. You can't quit. I quit. You can't quit. You're a fraud. You can't fraud me. You're my wife. I'm not your wife. You're my wife. Boy, I mean, I was working pretty good, but I quit my job. You can't quit your job. You're fired.